It's art time, baby.
What we have here, and I'm sure you already know, are a quartet of Space Marines. Space Marines from the Rogue Trader era wearing Mark 6 power armour, the best mark of power armour. The Space Marines on show consist of a Space Wolf, an Ultramarine, a White Scar, and the chap over on the left hand side is a member of the Field Police. I'm not sure if they were part of a chapter or their own thing. If you know, then please let us all know. You can see on the Space Wolf the original, and I would argue best, version of the Space Wolves logo. This one is a lot more simplified and stylized. Today's logo has a lot more detail and just doesn't seem to have the same cool look to it, in my humble opinion anyway. I did always like Rogue Trader era Space Wolves, but I was never a fan from their first big redo onwards, which was at the tail end of first edition, I believe. The Rogue Trader Space Wolf scheme was a bit different to today's. Instead of a sort of light ice sky blue armour, we have a very dull blue-grey. It wasn't very saturated at all and contrasted nicely with the red and yellow accent colours. I think they looked really nice. Nowadays, Heresy era Space Wolves are even more grey and dull and seem to be missing the yellow accents, so look a little more boring. The Ultramarine in the middle there hasn't really changed much over time, has it? It's still that sort of medium blue. Sometimes I see Ultramarines a little darker and sometimes a little lighter. Interestingly, this Ultramarine here has a laurel wreath on his head, a design motif that's been carried forth all the way up to their current incarnations. I have to say, I never realised that started so early. On the right hand side of the picture is a chapter you really didn't see much of in the Rogue Trader era, a White Scar. In fact, this might be the only picture of them in the entire of first edition. Please let me know if you guys know otherwise. I have to say, that clean Mark 6 scheme looks lovely. The White Scar has a little graffiti on his left shoulder pad, as is part of the course for Rogue Trader era Marines. However, I can't quite make out what it says. Hyman Peach? Flaming Punch? If any of you can tell, then please let us all know.
Now, if I ever see any Rogue Trader era graffiti, I add it to a list of other pieces of Rogue Trader era graffiti that I plan on using in some Rogue Trader era projects down the line somewhere.
Now this is what appears to be a depiction of some sort of post-apocalyptic vehicular chase scene. Basically Mad Max but in 40k. We sort of have that game nowadays and I think it's called Necromunda Ash Wastes. It looks okay, but I've never had the chance to play it. And if you have, let us know if it's any good or not. Speaking of Mad Max Fury Road, I myself only ever saw it once at the cinema when it was released with Mrs. SnakeWorks. I remember enjoying it, but also thinking it was nowhere near as good as the originals. I still even prefer Beyond Thunderdome to Fury Road. I think it was maybe the style of filming or something. Maybe I should revisit it. What did you guys think of Fury Road? On the left hand side of the picture, now what I think are some sort of authority figures. They have nice uniforms on and wear hats, a telltale giveaway. They also look a little bit like Imperial Guardsmen or Adeptus Arbites. There is a sign near one of their feet that appears to say Cuba Pedi. That means absolutely nothing to me and honestly makes no sense. Maybe it's an in-universe brand or something. On the right hand side of the picture is the other gang or crew. These appear to be your generic punks or desert scum. We know they are 40k era punks as they have mohawks and those slitty style sunglasses that we still don't know the name of. If you know the name of them, please let me know. Now Warhammer 40k has always had a thing about rare anti-gravity technology. Jet bikes and their ilk are supposed to be very rare in the setting, due to the tech being lost and hard to replicate, nor some such waffle. But here, We can see even the local punks have their own anti-grav vehicles, jet bikes and a weird chariot looking thing. Don't those Dark Eldar guys fly around on these? They look a bit like Green Goblin gliders. There's one more thing we need to talk about in this piece. Yet another elephant in the room. It's that A logo again. This time it's on the side of one of the jet bikes. We seem to see this logo more than any other, including the Imperial Eagle. Why is it so common? What on earth is going on? Where's the Doctor when you need him? What we have here appear to be Daleks, but missing their metal dresses, sort of like naked Daleks. And that's a free band name if you need one. They also appear to be missing their sink plungers and whisks. Daleks are one of the coolest robot designs ever, by the way. Are they even robots, or are they more cyborgs? How would you describe a Dalek? Amusingly, when we used to watch Doctor Who back in the mid-80s, I think, I would have been about 6 or 7 years old, when the Daleks came on the TV, we were so scared we used to hide behind my granny's sofa. The weird thing is, a lot of people apparently did the same thing. Do children still hide behind the sofa when scary things are on TV? Now, due to being a child of the 80s, I would actually say that Sylvester McCoy was my favourite of all the Doctors. I do also have a soft spot for Tom Baker too. I think his portrayal was very good. I saw a lot of reruns of the Tom Baker era a few years later. David Tennant, however, I find to be the single most overrated Doctor Who ever. I just find him irritating. Never could understand why everyone was so enamoured with him. What am I missing? So I doubt you would be surprised to find out that these robots in this piece of art are not really naked Daleks, but are in fact bombots, all one word. So the deal with bombots was very simple. They would be deployed in battle, drive towards the enemy lines, then, if they had survived, explode when in the vicinity of the target. I'm not sure if something ever existed in real life that's similar. All I can think of is the V1 Doodlebug rockets but on tracks, instead of wings. Now I think about it, was the Doodlebug the first cruise missile? So nowadays we have a similar vehicle or device in 40k known as the Cyclops Demolition Vehicle. It looks a bit like a little Lehman Russ chassis. It did the same sort of thing, drove to its target and exploded. It's possible it's gone OOP again, so I don't know if you can still buy them. Oh, also, they could be dropped out of the back of Valkyries, and that's awesome.
That reminds me, I need to add some of the old Cyclops demolition vehicles to my Elysian D99. Do they still sell them, or have they gone out of production as well?
I think what we're seeing here is a pair of orcs having an argument. Maybe it's a domestic, unless it's just a game or something. Although I'm not sure what game involves pointing guns at each other. They are orcs, I suppose, so anything's possible. I mean, I say they're orcs, but it's possible they might not be. They might be goblins, or Gretchen. Did any form of goblin ever exist in Warhammer 40,000? I remember Gretchen and snotlings, but no goblins. Although both of these orcoid things have strange shaped heads. The orc on the right has an extremely odd-shaped head. It's really long and thin. Or does it just look like that because his body is quite scrawny? I've only just noticed that. Maybe if you put a modern head, an orc head, on a skinny body, you get these. Whatever the case may be, it's weird. I do like it though. As is to be expected from launch era Warhammer 40,000 orc art, these guys are wearing typical RTB02 armour pads. The pads are usually like a circle or oval shape and have these sort of puffy textures on them. To me, I always thought they looked like the turtle shells from Mario Kart, but assume they are inspired by some sort of real-world armour. Maybe. The orc on the right has one of the weirdest weapons I think I've ever laid my eyes on, and that's saying a lot after looking at a lot of this old Warhammer 40,000 art. Look at its handle. It's really long and bendy. It looks like a scarf flapping in the wind, or a fishtail or something. Can any of you guys shed any light on what's going on there? Now, if you had to hazard a guess as to what clan the Orks belonged to, who would you go with? Me, I would probably guess Snakebites, the worst of the Ork clans by far. They look all sorts of feral and tatty, like my teenage years. It was all about the ripped baggy jeans and tartan jackets. They have a name, but I can't remember it right now. I think they might call them flannel these days. They were bloody horrible looking back. I don't miss those. A trio of Warhammer 40,000 cosplayers now from Comic-Con 3028. Do you think they'll still have Comic-Cons in the distant future? Have you ever been to Comic-Con? I know I haven't. Mrs. SnakeWorks wanted to go once to meet Damien from the Vampire Diaries. I think his name was Ian Somerhalder or something. I was never into that TV show, but she loved it, and its sequel series, the originals. It's hard to tell what these three amigos are dressed up as, but I think they're supposed to be Space Marines, maybe. They look a little bit like Mark 6 armour to me, although with a few weird additions and changes. We can see telltale signs of beaky helmets and also that shoulder pad with the nub on it, which we don't see anymore. However, they also look a bit like Adeptus Arbites to me, somewhere between Judge Dredd and Space Marines. Now, I've had a few people complain and take the piss out of the way I pronounce Adeptus Arbites. Apparently it makes me sound like a pirate. However, I would rather that than bring myself to call them Arbites. It sounds so childish and weird to me, like Miss Dynamite is singing Adeptus Arbite. Whatever happened to Miss Dynamite? Is she still going? Now, the cosplayer in the middle is wearing one hell of a snazzy hat. It's like a typical peaked cap, but has these squared off face protectors. It's possible these are two separate pieces, but in my head it's a one piece. I wonder what it's called. The geezer on the right has some interesting accessories going on. He has what appears to be a shoulder pad made from slats of wood riveted together, like part of an old keg or barrel. Oh, and a sheet over the shoulder. This ensemble reminds me a little of Marty McFly's homemade body armour and poncho arrangement from Back to the Future Part 3. Remember that movie? I preferred the second one myself, although I've not seen it in years. Now, yet again, as to be expected from characters portrayed in early 40k artwork, there are some interesting slogans to be found. On the left, we have Earth is dead, which makes a little bit of sense. Hell, it would make sense now. And also on the right is another slogan I can't quite make out. It looks like it might say, eat plasm. Eat plasma, I suppose? That might make sense.
Now, do you think graffiti needs to make a return to Warhammer 40,000? You know, slogans on the weapons and things. I'm not talking about graffiti on the walls, on the scenery. I suppose the graffiti could come back along with the old weird Space Marine camouflage schemes. They were rather interesting. Although some of them looked terrible, some of them did look quite good, I think.
What happens when ED-209 from RoboCop and the Hunter-Killer tanks from Terminator have a baby? Well, you get this contraption. I think it's pretty cool myself. You don't see much of this in Warhammer 40k anymore, do you? The head of this robot is a blatant ED-209 ripoff. It even has the strange microphone grill faceplate. I always wondered what that thing was supposed to be. Was it some sort of sensor, or was it a grill with something behind it? I need to go back now and have a look. There are some interesting shapes stuck to the side of the robot's head. On our right hand side is what I think is some sort of camera arrangement. On our left is what I can only describe as a fag packet. On the subject of cigarettes, they always remind me of my granddad. He always smoked cigarettes and his favourite brand was Players. Apparently not many people like those these days. I'm no cigarette expert, so I couldn't possibly comment. Now let's have a little look at this robot's weapons, shall we? On the left hand side of the picture, the robot appears to have a gun mount similar to today's Land Raiders. A double weapon, but they don't look the same. One of them could well be a las cannon. The bottom one and the one above it looks a bit like an auto cannon to me. It even has the muzzle tip thing and a big magazine. The other arm also has a pair of twin-linked weapons, although this time I seem to struggle with identifying them. Maybe some sort of battle cannon or melter weapon. What do you guys think? I'm sure at least one of you will know. Now, size-wise, we can't really tell how big this thing is, but there's one possible interesting clue there. Can you see it? The barbed wire. Judging by the scale, I would say this thing is quite big, possibly around the same size as the HK tanks from Terminator. Either that, or it's just cotton on the floor and this thing is tiny. Now, how many of you watching now fancy a trip to home base with me? Specifically the indoor plants section. I'm not even into plants, but I do enjoy a good nose around it, or any other garden centre for that matter. Maybe that's my age showing. Now, I must have bought 6 or 7 Venus flytraps over the years as a kid, every time I was at one of these garden centres. For some reason, I just could not keep them alive. Did I underwater them? Did I overwater them? I just don't know. They were hard. Anyway, this here is the Warhammer 40,000 version, and I would assume these ones are a lot easier to keep alive. Now, I was always a little naughty with mine. Everyone told me you absolutely must not feed them flies manually, or you could kill the plant. So guess what I did? Yep, I fed it manually. It was fascinating watching the traps close around the prey. If you haven't ever seen it, you need to go and have a look. I bet there's footage on YouTube somewhere. Now, since I was a youngster, I always thought the Venus flytrap was one of the coolest carnivorous plants you could buy for your home. But I do think there's a cooler one. The monkey pot jars, or whatever they're called. Pitcher plants, that's it. Just jar-shaped plants with sticky acidic goo at the bottom to melt the prey. Fantastic looking specimens. I keep meaning to get one next time I go to the garden centre. Now, getting back onto the topic of this particular plant in 40k, we know that this one likes to catch and eat people, so it must be quite large indeed. A man-sized Venus flytrap is a scary proposition. Imagine getting eaten alive by one of these things and then slowly digested over a long period of time. Again, it reminds me a bit of the Sarlacc in Return of the Jedi, to be digested over a period of 1,000 years or whatever it was. Although I think you would die of thirst first, or asphyxiation. I never did understand that threat. Whichever way it works, it would be a nasty way to go.
Along with the green cactus things with the red spikes coming out, I think these would be a fun little Oldhammer themed project to make one day. A nice little terrain project. A Venus man trap sounds quite fun to make to me.
I am Gandalf the White, and I come to you now looking bloody awful. Poor old Gandalf, he really doesn't look well here, does he? I also think the top half of his head is missing, or he has no hair or something. I get the feeling something isn't quite right. To be fair, I would say this wizard's chap looks a lot more like Saruman than Gandalf. Thinking about it, didn't they call themselves the White in the movies, but of many colours in the book? Or am I getting mixed up? Who was the White and who was of many colours? I know there's some Tolkien experts watching who can clear that up for us. Now, I don't know who this is actually supposed to be, but I suppose this could be an early representation of the Emperor's right-hand man, Malcador. Was Malcador his first name or surname? Was it David Malcador or Malcador Smith? We need to know. Now, Gandalf here is lucky enough to be sporting a couple of medals. I think I can make out little embossed Imperial eagles on them. What do you think he won them in? The 100-metre sprint or the psychic telepathy distance? Perhaps even mind reading. Good work, Gandalf. Well done. Now, for some reason, Gandalf's hat here is really lopsided. It's sticking out of the side of his head at a right angle. My gut tells me it should be either pointing straight up or flopping down behind its head. Maybe it's a result of the wind effect that also seems to be affecting his cape and medals. Also, that lopsided pointed head look reminds me of Venger from Dungeons & Dragons. 10 internet cookies if you can remember that guy. Maybe the breeze is because he's running so fast to catch the thief who stole his shoes. Poor old Gandalf, having to go barefoot sucks, unless you're a hobbit. Maybe he should invest in some sandals. I haven't seen anyone wearing sandals for a long time now, thinking about it, but I guess we have just had winter.
Some fantastic artwork there. If you want to see some more Oldhammer themed artwork, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.